Could you ever imagine that the Third Crusade, that legendary war between Richard the Lionheart and Saladin, was ignited by the fault of a single man? Not because of faith, not because of kings, but because of the insatiable greed of a rogue knight who decided that he was permitted to do anything. This man spent 16 years in a Muslim dungeon, and when he emerged, he decided the world was in his debt. The only man who dared to build a fleet in the desert to sail down the Red Sea and plunder Mecca itself. It was he who turned Saladin's war from a sacred struggle into a personal vendetta. Brace yourselves for a shock. This is the story of Raynald of Châtillon. Today, you will learn how this knight, without a penny to his name, became the Prince of Antioch in one audacious move. How 16 years of captivity transformed him from an adventurer into a ruthless monster who despised absolutely everyone, including his own king. We will uncover the truth about his sacrilege in the Red Sea, an adventure that forced Saladin to swear a personal oath to kill Raynald with his own hands, and the finale, that infamous scene in the tent after the Battle of Hattin. We will understand why the Sultan offered water to King Guy, but for Raynald, he saved his sword. This is not a story about faith. This is a story of pure chaos. He was the catalyst who blew up the fragile peace built by the leper king Baldwin IV, the very provocateur who made the catastrophe at Hattin inevitable. We have seen the teacher who forged the sword, the student who struck the blow, the hero who parried it, and the shield that held it back. Today, you will see the Detonator. This is the story of Raynald of Châtillon, the man who burned the world and forced everyone else to pay the price. Raynald of Châtillon arrives in the Holy Land in 1147 with the Second Crusade. He is the classic archetype of the second son. He has no lands, no money, no title, only a sword, a horse, and boundless, reckless ambition. He enters the service of Constance, Princess of Antioch, a young widow ruling one of the wealthiest cities in the world. The Byzantine emperor and the barons of the kingdom have already selected a noble, wealthy aristocrat to be her husband, but in 1153, Constance shocks everyone. She secretly marries Raynald. Overnight, a penniless drifter knight transforms into the Prince of Antioch. He leapfrogged over the heads of kings. He reveals his true nature immediately. He needs money. He demands it from the wealthiest man in the city, the Patriarch of Antioch. The Patriarch refuses. Raynald throws the priest into a dungeon. He orders him to be tortured. And then, according to chroniclers, he commands that the Patriarch's wounded head be smeared with honey, and that he be chained to the summit of the citadel under the scorching sun, left to be eaten by insects. He got his money. But money was never the end goal for him. It served as fuel for his vanity. In 1156, he decided that the Byzantine Emperor Manuel I owed him payment. The emperor refused. So Raynald does the unthinkable. He gathers an army and attacks not the Muslims, but Christian Cyprus, which belonged to Byzantium. It didn't look like a war. It looked like a slaughter. His men looted the island for 3 weeks, sparing neither churches nor monasteries. They tortured monks to find out where the gold was hidden. Raynald returned to Antioch obscenely rich, but he had made 2 mistakes. First, he showed that faith meant nothing to him, while gold meant everything. Second, he had mortally insulted the Byzantine Empire. 2 years later, Emperor Manuel brought an army to the walls of Antioch. Raynald was forced to crawl barefoot to the emperor, dressed in rags with a rope around his neck, begging for forgiveness. He experienced humiliation. But he did not break. His greed and recklessness knew no bounds. And in 1160, his luck ran out. During another plundering raid, he fell into an ambush set by Nur ad-Din Zangi. The doors of a dungeon in Aleppo slammed shut behind the prince of Antioch. The trap had snapped. Raynald had no doubt this was merely a short pause. He waited for gold. He believed that for a figure such as himself, the emperor or a rich wife would pay any treasure. But the silence in response turned into torture. The Byzantine emperor, whom he had forced to kiss the ground, sent not a single coin. The barons who hated the upstart remained silent. Even Constance did not pay for the husband who had brought her so much disgrace. And time stopped for him. For 16 years he rotted in a stone sack, while the world outside changed beyond recognition. While he stared at the same wall, his enemy Nur ad-Din Zangi died, his wife died, the boy king Baldwin IV ascended the throne, and in the south a new power rose, Saladin, a name the prisoner did not even know. In 1176, the doors finally opened, but it was not a human who walked out into freedom. Squinting in the light was a 50-year-old old man with the soul of a furious wolf. He had lost everything, his title, his youth, his influence, and he was driven by only one goal, to make this new world, a stranger to him, pay for every single day spent in the dark. His path lies toward Jerusalem. He is a living legend, a martyr who suffered for the faith for 16 years. He is accorded honors. And what does a 50-year-old adventurer who has lost everything do? He does the only thing he knows how to do. He finds a wealthy heiress. He charms Stephanie of Milly, a widow who owns the most strategic and most profitable territory in the entire kingdom, the lordship of Oultrejourdain. And in 1177, he marries her. He is a prince once more, this time the Prince of Kerak. Now, let's look at the map. Kerak is not just a castle, it is a hawk's nest. It is an impregnable fortress that hangs directly over the main caravan route connecting Egypt and Syria, the two halves of Saladin's empire. Anyone sitting in Kerak can, like a spider, cut Saladin's main artery. And Raynald immediately begins to exploit this. He joins the 16-year-old Baldwin IV in his desperate attack at Montguichard. But where Baldwin saw a miracle and God's will, Raynald saw something else. He saw Saladin's elite army, his Mamluks, break and run from a handful of knights. He did not understand that they fled because of Baldwin's persona. He decided that Saladin's warriors were cowards, and this became his fatal mistake. He decided that Saladin could be robbed with impunity. Unlike Baldwin, who fought for faith, Raynald fought for money. He begins to rob caravans. Baldwin IV is furious. The king is desperately trying to preserve a fragile peace, while his most powerful baron behaves like a bandit, provoking Saladin. But Raynald spat on the king. He had become the law unto himself, and soon he would prove that robbing caravans was not enough for him. He would take a swing at the sacred. The walls of Kerak made him invulnerable, but they also became his new cage. Ordinary robbery no longer satisfied him. Gold flowed like a river, but Raynald's ambitions demanded something more than just the role of a highwayman. He yearned to humiliate Saladin the way he himself had once been humiliated. He needed a strike that would shake the foundations of the Islamic world. Saladin, fearing this madman, began to fortify the trade routes, and then Raynald's gaze fell on the map, to the place where the desert met the water, the Red Sea, a trade artery that no one had ever dared to touch. No one had a fleet there. No one possessed the ability to transport ships there across hundreds of kilometers of scorching sands. The task seemed impossible, but for a man who had lost 16 years of life, the word impossible meant nothing. He conceived not just a military operation, he conceived the greatest sacrilege in the history of the Middle Ages. In the winter of 1182, axes began to chop in the forests of Oultrejourdain. Raynald of Châtillon's pirate fleet in the Red Sea is not just robbery, it is a declaration of war against the entire Islamic civilization. He loots merchant vessels sailing from India to Egypt. He attacks ships carrying pilgrims traveling for the Hajj. He burns the port of Adab. But his main target is Jeddah, the port of Mecca, and perhaps Mecca itself. It was as if an enemy fleet had entered the Tiber to sack the Vatican. For Saladin, who built his legitimacy on the image of the defender of the faith, this was not merely an insult, it was an existential challenge. He could not call himself a defender while Christian pirates threatened the prophet's tomb. Saladin's brother, Al-Adil, the ruler of Egypt, urgently builds a fleet. He chases down Raynald's pirates and destroys them. The prisoners are brought to Cairo. Saladin orders them all executed, but not just executed. They are executed publicly as a warning in every major city of the empire. And a few of the most noble pirates are taken to Mecca and sacrificed during the Hajj, like camels, on the very spot they had threatened. Raynald of Châtillon avoided capture. He had already returned to his castle of Kerak with the loot. But it was on this day, in 1183, that Saladin swore his famous personal oath. He vowed that if Allah ever delivered Raynald of Châtillon to him, he would kill him with his own hands. The war ceased to be politics. The confrontation turned into a vendetta. Raynald returned to Kerak a rich man, but now a sword of Damocles hung over his head. Saladin's personal oath meant there would be no mercy. As long as the kingdom was ruled by the iron leper, Baldwin IV, Raynald had to curb his appetite. The king, even while dying alive, possessed a will capable of keeping mad dogs on a chain. He forced Saladin to retreat from the walls of Kerak, but he also forbade Raynald from further provocations. But death knows no truces. In 1185, Baldwin dies. Following him, his young heir passes away. The chains collapsed. Power falls to the weak Guy of Lusignan, who owed his crown to intrigue, not right. He needed support, and Raynald of Châtillon realized his time had come. Now he acted not as a vassal, but as a puppeteer. A sacred truce was in effect, sealed with wax seals. Saladin waited. But for Raynald, peace was unprofitable. He saw the richest caravans passing by his castle, protected by a piece of paper regarding the peace. And at the end of 1186, he commits the act that signs the death warrant for the entire kingdom. He attacks that very caravan. This represented not just loot. It traveled under a personal guarantee of peace. According to some accounts, though not fully confirmed, Saladin's own sister was in this caravan. In any case, it was unheard-of wealth and an unheard-of insult. Saladin, as is known, immediately dispatches envoys, not to Raynald, to King Guy of Lusignan. He demands restitution and the punishment of the oath-breaker. And here, the weak King Guy demonstrates why Baldwin despised him so much. He cannot control Raynald. He begs Raynald to return the stolen goods. Raynald's answer went down in history. He conveyed to the king, I am the Lord in my lands, just as he is the Lord in his, and I have no peace with Saladin. He publicly announced that the king had no authority over him. When Saladin heard this response, he understood. The kingdom is doomed. It is rotting from the inside. He began gathering his army for Hattin. July 4th, 1187. The Battle of Hattin is lost. The army is destroyed. King Guy and Raynald of Châtillon are among the captives brought to Saladin's tent. And now, that infamous scene. Saladin, true to the code, sees that King Guy is dying of thirst. He orders ice-cold water to be brought and offers it to Guy. This is Sharab al-Aman, the drink of hospitality. He who has shared water with the host receives a guarantee of life. King Guy drinks and passes the cup to Raynald. Saladin immediately stops him. "You," he says to the king, "did not give him water. The law of hospitality does not extend to this man." He turns to Raynald. He looks at the man who sat for 16 years in his mentor's dungeon, at the man who tried to sack Mecca, at the man who just destroyed an entire kingdom because of his greed. He offers Raynald the chance to accept Islam to save his life. Raynald refuses. Then Saladin, the righteous king, stands up, draws his sword, and personally fulfills the oath sworn 4 years ago. He strikes Raynald. His guards finish off the provocateur. The debt was paid. The head of Raynald of Châtillon rolled onto the sand, putting a bloody period at the end of the history of the Kingdom of Jerusalem. The truth is paradoxical, and it has haunted historians for 8 centuries. This man, despised by his own people and hated by his enemies, ultimately won a strange, twisted victory. Through his death, he achieved what he had wanted all his life. He set the world on fire. Because he proved one terrible truth. To build peace for years requires the wisdom of kings, but to destroy everything in a single day, one madman with a torch is enough. And that flame did not go out in the tent at Hattin. It raged for another 100 years, burning generations. But this was only the prologue to the real agony. The story of Raynald of Châtillon opens our new massive cycle, the sunset of the Crusaders. Ahead of us lie 5 episodes, 5 tragedies, and one grand finale of a great era. And the first to try and extinguish this fire will be a man who was the complete opposite of Raynald. If Châtillon was a demon of greed, then the new hero will be possessed by holiness. He will come to the desert not to plunder, but to save souls. Yet his fanaticism will prove more terrible than greed. His name is Louis IX, the Saint, and his story is a chronicle of how the road to paradise can lead an entire army straight into hell. Subscribe so you don't miss the beginning of the new cycle. Like if the story of the Detonator struck a chord with you, and leave a comment. Who do you think is more to blame? Raynald, who committed the crime, or the weak king who untied his hands? Thank you. See you at the premiere.